Hello everyone. So we are again back and this time we are going to complete our backend APIs. So here I'm just going to create this new message handler as you can see. Okay. And what we're going to pass from here is this data, then the socket instance, which is this one, and the IO. Let's get back inside the new message handler.js file. And as a first step, we have to first of all create an arrow function. Okay. So let's see how this is going to be done. So here, what I'm going to do, let's first start by writing the function, which is going to be called new message handler. Okay. Now, this message is going to be asynchronous in nature because obviously we are going to make some API calls inside it. Okay. So let's create this function. Now, the arguments that we are going to receive will be socket, then we'll get the data and the IO. Okay. And let's see how we are going to proceed ahead in this. Okay. So what is going to happen? First of all, we need to console log the data that we are going to receive. So let me just write console.log data. I just want to, console log so that we can see what we are getting from the client side inside our terminal on the backend. Okay, this is, useful for debugging purpose. Then here, I'm just going to destructure everything that is contained inside the data field. Now this data is actually going to give us two things. The first is message and the second is conversation ID. So whenever a user wants to send a message from the client side, they're going to basically emit an event, and that event is going to give us this data as a payload. This data is going to contain two fields. One is message and the second is conversation ID. Now from the message, we are going to destructure even more fields. So this message property is again going to be an object, and from this we are going to get the author of the message. Okay, then the content of the message, which is actually, you can also call it caption, the text part, then the media. Okay, then we'll also have the audio URL. Okay, document, type of the message, and the Giphy URL. So these are all the things that we are going to get from the client side. Okay, inside the message. Now here, in order to gracefully handle the errors, I'm going to actually make use of this try catch block. So let me write try catch, and inside the catch block I'm just going to write error. Okay, let me write over here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to write inside the catch block console dot error. Whenever some error happens, I'm going to log that inside the console. So let me just write error, uh, error handling new message. Okay, error handling new message. So when we are, there is an error in the new message, that is what we are basically going to log into the console, and we are also going to log the error object itself. Now after that, I also want to emit an event back to the client when some error happens during creation of new message. So I'm going to emit this error event, and we'll be listening for this error event from our client side. The message that I want to send from here will be failed to send message. Okay, failed to send message. Now inside this try block, I'm going to now, start by creating our message. But in order to create the message, we should also have the conversation. So here, first of all, the first step is to find the conversation by conversation ID. And this is a very easy task because we have, run the find query many times by now. So here I'm just going to write find the conversation by conversation ID. So what we need to do, the answer is very simple. Just get the conversation model over here. So let's write conversation, and you can see it will be imported from model slash conversation. And from this, we are going to, run this query, find by ID. Let's pass the conversation ID, which is this one. So let me write conversation ID over here. And here, as a result, I'm just going to get the conversation. So let me write conversation equals await conversation dot find by ID. Okay. Now here, what we are going to do is we are going to write if not conversation. That means we are checking if we didn't find the conversation, then that means we are going to return an error. So let me write socket dot emit, and the error event name will be error, and the data will be just an object containing this message property. So let me write message, which will be conversation not found. Okay. Now, after emitting this error event, if the flow comes, if this condition doesn't comes out to be true, then that means the conversation was found. So the second step is to create the message. Now this is the first time actually we are doing anything inside this message schema, because right now we haven't, even imported this message model inside any other file. So let me write inside new message handler the second step, which is to create a new message, create a new message uh, using the message model. So this is what we are going to do right now. We are going to just create the new message. And it's very easy to create any new record, and that is we just have to reference the model, which is actually the message model coming from model slash message. And then on this we need to call the create method. Now this create method is going to receive all the properties that are needed to create a message, and those properties are these things: author, content, media, audio, URL, document type, and diff URL. So just let's just copy those things from there and pass it over here. Now, after we have written this, as a result, I'm just going to get back the new message that was created after this query is run. Okay. So after creating the message, let me tell you that if I take a look inside the conversation, you can see we are going to store the messages ID inside this messages field. So that means we need to post the message ID inside this array. Okay. Inside this array. So here we have the conversation. So let's write the third step, which is the third step is to post the message ID, post the message ID to messages array in conversation. So I hope you understand what we are going to do in the next step. That is, first of all, we have the conversation. Now on this conversation, we know that there is a property called messages, and on this messages, I want to post another message ID. So the message ID is new message dot underscore id. Okay, so now here we have done what we have basically written over here. That is exactly what we are doing in the next line. And then the fourth step is to populate the conversation with message and participant and send it back to the user. So let me write populate populate the conversation with messages and participants and participants. Here, let me just, correct the spelling. So I'm going to write populate the conversation with messages and participants. And then here, I'm just going to get the updated conversation. So we are going to run a query again. And this query will be await on the conversation model. We are going to again find the conversation by the ID. So I'm going to write find by ID. And the conversation ID is, you can get the conversation ID from here. This is the conversation ID. So let me just pass it over here. And on this find query, we are going to call the populate method. So let me change populate, and this will be populate messages. Please make sure that this field name is actually correct, because it has to be exactly similar to what is written over here: messages and participants. Okay, there's any spelling mistake is going to result into an error. So let me also change another populate, and that will be used for populating the participants. So participants. Okay. Now we have the updated conversation with populated messages and participants. So let's now talk about the fifth step over here. So the fifth step is to find the participants who are online inside this conversation, because there is a chance that one of the user, when he is sending the message, the other user might not be online. So I don't want to, emit the event unnecessarily. So I'm just going to, find the participants, find the participants that who are online. So after the message is created and we got, post the message ID into the conversation, then we also populated the message and participant. We are going to find the participants who are online. And how we're going to check if the participant is online? We are just going to check if the status value is set to online. Here, O must be capital because that's an enum. So the value will be matched exactly character to character and have a socket ID. And we also need to, check for this condition that user must be online and they should also have a socket ID. So let's write const online participants, and this will be actually equal to, we have the updated conversation. Now inside the conversation, we know that we have a field called participants. So let me write participants. Okay. And on this participants, actually, we are going to call this filter method. which is actually a method on arrays in JavaScript. Now inside filter, we are going to iterate over each participant one by one. So let me write participant. Okay. Now for each participant, we are going to check two conditions. First is participant dot status. It should be equal to online, where O is capital. Okay. And the second condition is participant must have a socket ID. So let's write participant dot socket ID, not socket, but socket ID. So let me just format this document again. So you can see this is how we are going to get the online participants list. Okay. If you want, you can also, console log the online participants over here. So let me just write console.log online participants. You will be able to view the list in your terminal when we run our server and this function is executed. Now, the sixth step, and which is also, the last step, is to emit the new message back to the online users. So here I'm just going to write emit new message, new dash message. This is the event name that we are going to emit back to the online participants. So let me write emit this event to online participants online participants. Okay. Now we need to again iterate over online participants. So I'm just going to write online participants dot. Here I'll use the for each method. Okay. Now we already have the array which is our online participants, so we can remove that. Now for each element, here in place of element, let me just write participant because that's more explanatory. So here I have written for each participant. What we are going to do, first of all, let's console log the participant socket ID. So each participant contains the socket ID, so I can just log it like this. Here the participant is actually going to be the user. So this participant is going to have all the properties that we have inside the user document. Okay, I hope that is clear again. So let me just get back to this one. After logging the socket ID of each online participant, we are now going to again make use of this IO from this argument because we want to emit an event to a given socket ID. I have already explained this concept to you that whenever we want to emit an event to a given socket ID, we use this IO from our server. So IO dot to and then the socket ID. Socket ID is this participant dot socket ID. So I can just enter it over here. Okay. Now, on this one, I want to emit an event. So let's write dot emit, and the event name will be new direct chat. Okay, we are going to actually listen for exactly the same event on our client side. Now, when we are emitting the event, I also want to pass some data. So inside this data, which is the object, second argument, I'm just going to pass two things. First one is conversation ID. So the conversation ID is will be equal to conversation ID and the message property, which means the new message that was just created. So new message. Okay. This is the one new message that we are basically sending back to the user. So this is our function for handling the new message. Okay. Now I'm just going to export this function from this file so that we can use it inside our socket server. So let's just write module.exports module.exports and that will be equal to the function name which is new message handler. Now we can just go back to our socket server and where we have written this to do new message handler. Inside this curly bracket which is the body of the function, I'm just going to write new message handler and inside this new message handler we need to pass these things which is our socket data and IO. So let's write socket data and IO. Let me again remind you that this socket is coming from here. Data is coming from the client side payload and this IO is coming from here. Okay. Now let's also mark this to do as done. So I'm just going to highlight it and mark it as done. So now we have set it up all the event emitters and listeners on our backend side. Okay. Let me just make sure that whenever we are, sending some response back to the client, we are, returning in the appropriate place. So here I'm just going to search for res dot status. Let me just, search, check everything. So inside auth controller, let's start from here. You see, we are returning an error. So we are adding this return at the start. Then here we are returning the success response. So there is no need for return. Here we are returning error again. So we are adding the return keyword again. Success again. This here we have the already stated. Here we have the already status code, so there is no need. Okay, this is correct. Let me just, check from here. You can see the status code already. Here we are, sending the status code 400, but we are not returning since we are inside the catch block. So there is nowhere else to go after this. So we can just leave it like that. Now inside the user controller, okay, this is correct. And over here where we are, returning the error 400 status code, we are adding the return keyword. Okay, so everything is correct. Okay, our server is, set it up correctly. Let's also check our server.js if everything is correct inside this file. So we have set it up our Express app imported.env. Then we are configuring the .env file. We have imported socket server. After defining the port and getting the access to HTTP, we created HTTP server. Then we registered our socket server. Then connected our MongoDB database. After the database connection was successful, we started listening on the server on the given port, which is actually coming from our config env. Now inside our app.js, you can see we have imported lots of packages. Actually, these are all third-party packages. Okay, and there are lots of middleware. This is our Express application. Okay, then whenever we are calling this use, we are basically adding another middleware in the process. Okay, and over here you can see we also have the rate limiter. Then you can see now this is the application that we have created. Okay, now we can do one thing. We can just connect to our database by running the query. So let me just go to our package.json file, and you can see we created this start dev command for running it in a development mode. So here what I'm going to do, let's just write npm run and then the command name, which is start colon dev. Let's run this and see if everything is working or not. So we got an error. Let's see what is making our application crash. So here you can see it's saying that cannot access schema before initialization. So inside message.js model, so let's go to model message.js. And okay, so I have written this document schema before initializing the schema. So I need to just move it one line like this, and after that everything will be correct. So our server is restarting, and you can see now our MongoDB connection is successful, and also server is listening on port 8000. So that means our server is done. Okay. Next is to start integrating all the APIs into our client side. And when we start integrating, we are also going to see all the console logs that we have placed. Okay. And also since we have implemented this Morgan logger, you can see inside app.js we have this Morgan in the development mode. So it's also going to give us, logs inside the terminal, which will be useful to see all the API calls that will be made to our server. So that's it for this particular live stream. Since we have completed our backend, so I want to congratulate you for coming this far in the course. And as a next step, we are going to take a short break. Okay. And after that, we are going to again come back and start integrating everything inside our client side. So this is 7th October, and I'm actually going to complete this application that you can see on the demo link. Everything will be completed today. Okay. It's all going to basically take us 3 to 4 hours more in order to complete this application. So that's it for this one. I'm going to see you in the next video. Okay. Thank you everyone for watching this one. Let's meet in the next.